Authorship's about owning the fact that you're going to be doing it terrified. Can you accept that? You want to know, how do I get rid of all these feelings? Those feelings are what motivate you. They were put on this earth for a reason. And it isn't to just be fi. You're put on this earth to do something that only you can do. And most people don't investigate, well, what is that thing?
Welcome to Catching Up to Fi, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to Fi together.
Hey, Jackie, guess what? It's Plutus Awards season, but our audience won't know what the Plutus Awards are. What are they?
Yay, woohoo! We are excited that we are in the running for several different categories for the Plutus Awards. And the Plutus Awards basically is giving important recognition to independent content creators in the financial space. It's been around for 10 plus years at least, right? I can't exactly remember how long, but anytime I saw that a content creator won a Plutus Award, that was a big deal. And it demonstrated that they were great in what they were doing in terms of the financial space as an independent creator.
Yeah, I mean, this would mean the world to us if you would consider going on to the website plutus.awardsplatform.com. That's plutus.awardsplatform, one word, .com. We're up for about 7 categories, Jackie, and one we're really proud of is the best new personal finance content creator audio. Now, we started 2 years ago. We've had over 1 million downloads, but we're still allowed, because of a miss last year, to be up for this new content creator award. It would mean the world to us if you would consider voting in this category.
Yeah. And like you said, even though it's been 2 years, we're still considered new. We've got podcasts that's been out there for 10 plus years and they've gotten really good at it. So we're proud to be still considered being in the best new personal finance content. Now, also, we've got several other categories, and one of those is Content Creator of the Year audio. So this is another great one that we believe we're deserving of it. And if you think that we deserve that and you want to do a little give back, we would love it if you would nominate us for that category as well.
Yeah, and there's People Choice Awards as well, and we're up for the one for audio.
Yeah, and then we've got the Plutus Storyteller Award. Bill, you know, we have some great storytelling on this show that are from the voice of late starters. And then you and I have shared our own story, as well as Becky. So the Storyteller Award definitely spoke to me. So I wanted to make sure, I was so glad to have us on the list for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, your stories are a pivotal part of the show. We late starters are here together to learn from each other, and your stories are critical to get out there to the financial independence community. Another category that we're up for is Best Traditional Retirement Content. You know, we do give hardcore information. It isn't all softcore. We are also hardcore.
Yeah, not only that, Bill, but a lot of us that are getting a late start maybe a little bit older, where we are planning for traditional retirement. We all want to reach financial independence, but when it comes to the retirement piece, perhaps we are in those traditional retirement ages. So we talk about things like Social Security. We've had something about Medicare. We've had a lot of CFPs and other financial professionals that are talking about even the traditional part of it. So this was a great category to be a part of as well. Another one is one that's close to my heart, is Best Personal Finance Content for Women. Our audience is 70+% women, and we have a lot of shows dedicated to that. We just recently had Carrie Carbonaro. I did a Women in Taxes webinar that I cross-pollinated to our platform, but speaking to women is a big part of our show and what we like to bring in.
Yeah, and lastly in these categories, we're up for Best Personal Finance Content for Underserved Communities. We feel that the late starters are an underserved community. We are probably the only voice in the podcast world out there speaking to you, the catching up to fires, the late starters. This is a new thing for us, and we hope that you feel that you're being served.
Yeah, and if you think that, please support us in this way. We don't ask for much, and we certainly appreciate you tuning in every single Sunday and occasionally on Wednesdays. And if you think it's worthy of other people finding the show, please take the time to do it. I think there's a quick little registration, but you can get through it in 5 minutes. So if we could have 5 minutes of your time to do that, we would be so grateful. And you know, Bill, I also have the book Fire for Dummies and a little bit of my own platform. So I'm in the running as well for a few things, not competing with Catching Up to Fi, but one of my favorite. So if you want to support me as well, I'm under the best new personal finance content creator written for Fire for Dummies. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, also the best new personal finance book. And we all think that's the case. Fire for Dummies for life.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I've shared a lot of the content from the book on the show, of course, but also I'm in the running for best financial advisor content. I am a CFP professional, so I got into that category. And then there's something called the Plutus Resilience Award. And I'm not sure if this is a new category or not, but this definitely spoke to me. I've openly shared my story to, get it out there, and hopefully it impacts other people or inspires other people by sharing my mistakes and things like that and how I bounce back. So resilience is a very important term for me, term of endearment, really. And then the last one, Bill, is Best Financial Independence Retire Early Content for Fire for Dummies. I literally wrote the book on financial independence and retire early. So that's the last one that I'm in. So for both Catching Up to Fi and my book, we would love for you to take a minute and vote for these. Again, it's at plutus.awardsplatform.com. It has a quick little registration. You can be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, you'll see this link in our newsletter. You'll see it in our show notes. And we just hope you feel as we do that we put out some stuff that is worth listening to. Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to Fi. I am so excited for today's conversation, Jackie, because it's different. And this gentleman has not been introduced as much to the Fi space. We met him at Econome. It was a refreshing breath of fresh air in a world that's often focused on numbers and how to get to financial freedom. But then what do we do when we become free? And that's one of the questions we're going to ask today, right, Jackie?
That's right. Azul did an amazing job at Econome, and then he had this great TEDx. And I feel like a lot of our audience may have that secret desire to write a book, but it always sounded overwhelming. Well, Azul is going to debunk some of those myths today. And I, being someone that has written a book, it's not easy, but boy, it is so invigorating to be able to put what you have in your head in writing.
Yeah, and before we introduce him, we want Azul, as what we do always on shows, is to promote a charity that's near and dear to their hearts. And today the charity is Gray Bears, GREYBEARS.org. Azul, what is this charity to you?
Well, it's a community-based organization whose job is to create community through food, healthy food, providing groceries that you would normally get to seniors and really anyone. They won't turn you away. And meals and food and community service like classes for seniors. And they support that through their thrift store, through their other organizational parts that help serve the community by providing resources like thrifted items. It's a place for community to go. You don't have to be a senior to go there, but I really love the fact that they're taking care of a part of the population we usually just push aside.
And what's neat about it, you told us, is that it's an impact local charity. People get lost in these massive charities that are trying to save the world. I mean, they're taking care of a small element of your community in California, and I really like that.
Yeah, it isn't intended to scale. It's intended just for that community, and it's been around for 50 years, which says a lot about their commitment to the community.
All right, Jackie, let's introduce this phenomenal human being who's all about inspiring us to find our gift, and we'll talk about that first. Azul Terronez is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author who has coached hundreds of people for over a decade. He is co-founder and lead coach at Authors Who Lead, a platform dedicated to empowering authors to share their stories. Azul went from being an unknown school teacher to a best-selling author, but he wasn't always that confident that he could do it. He didn't know that he was dyslexic until he flunked English when he was at UCLA. That discovery explained why writing and reading were such a struggle. and it motivated him. He went on to graduate with a master's degree and became a teacher. And the subject he taught, well, guess what? It was English. That path led him to guide hundreds of students to write and become their own published authors. Azul's extensive knowledge and experience has helped leaders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs build brands and messages with their books, including Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income.
Yeah, well, Azul has also been a keynote speaker at international conferences, including Econome, the conference we talk about all the time. And his TED Talk, What Makes a Good Teacher Great, has been viewed over 4 million times. He is author of the book, The Art of Apprenticeship, How to Hack Your Way into Any Industry, Land a Kick-Ass Mentor, and Make a Killing Doing What You Love. On the show today, he answers the questions, is writing a book worth it? And why is there, quote, no greater agony than an untold story, a quote by Maya Angelou. So Azul, welcome to Catching Up to Fi.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor. I need to cut that bio down. It's kind of embarrassing. It's so long.
Look, we gorged it a little bit because we love to scour the internet and really dig into our guest. And all of that was so deserving. And we want to know that we're talking to someone very special. We want our audience to know that.
Great. Thank you.
Well, we want to go back in time because you wrote this book, and we're going to tell the story about how you came to this book in 2014. We find the content to be evergreen. And then chapter 1 is really sort of the genesis of finding yourself, finding your gift. And you quote at the beginning of this chapter, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service to others by Gandhi. And that's what we're about here. And that's what being Phi is all about, whether we know it or not. You also quote Seth Godin, one of my faves. Our gift creates meaning in a meaningful way to connect to the world, to be a part of the tribe of givers. Okay, Azul, would you do us the honor of maybe reading the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of the gift, and then we'll talk about finding your own inner gift.
Sure. That's great. Here's the book. It's just Art of Apprenticeship. And the chapter 1 is called What is Your Gift? Our humanity, like our natural desire to discover, play, and create, is also built around the nature of giving. And it seems innate to love our children, our family, or significant other, and our friends. But what doesn't seem natural is loving the larger world. I don't mean the world that requires world peace at times. I mean loving the world known as humanity. We contribute to humanity, positively or negatively, depending on how conscious we are of the giving we do. Giving to the world makes you part of it. Holding on to your gift that was intended to be a part of the world leaves us depressed, feeling incomplete, unloved, and unappreciated. Gratitude comes from both giving and receiving. When someone accepts our gift, we feel valued, appreciated, and honored. One reason is that to be valued at a work or for our work is one of the top needs we have as humans. There you go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and the rest of the book builds on this. But what people need to realize, and when you talk about the gift, you talk about we all have a book inside of us too, and that may be the gift of our story, the gift of our skills that allow us to help mentor the next generation. And that is where we have sort of that robust retirement. And people talk about the 4 phases of retirement, and people don't realize that phase 4, which Fritz Gilbert elucidates in a blog he writes about it, is entitled Reinvent and Rewire. And we all want to get there. And today's show is about getting to phase 4 of life, maybe well before you retire even, right?
Right. I think so many of us hope that someday we can be someone that can be generous instead of taking action to be generous in the moment. And that doesn't require you to be Phi at all. It requires you to be present, right? And realizing that your gift of existence isn't a mistake or shouldn't have been done differently. You have exactly what you need to show up in the world and share your gift. But most of us think, who am I to share anything?
Yeah, I believe that too. I wrote a self-published book a long time ago, and I enjoy writing, and it really is cathartic to be able to do that, and everyone can do it. I think that's your point. We're going to dive into when you were a teacher, but you influenced a whole class of students to write their own book, and I remember that from your talk at Econome. You remember that, Bill?
Yeah, I do. And Azul talks about, and one of the quotes he has is, how many days are you willing to give up for the sake of someday? He talks about being present. He talks about being in the moment. He talks about not necessarily waiting to retirement. Retire before you retire. Embrace the world of your gift so that you can bring others along with you. This podcast has been that for us. I never thought I'd re-exercise the right side of my brain. I was lost in being a doctor. I was lost in the industrial educational complex and following sort of a predetermined path. This is about getting off that path and creating your own path. Right, Jackie?
That's right. So you arrived at writing a book after you discovered you were dyslexic. I can never say that word, but that is even more interesting than anything else, that now your focus is the written word when you had trouble reading it before. So I guess I'm curious how you discovered that you were dyslexic. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's ironic. I was probably my junior year of college. I had never even heard that word before. I was in a class. It was like an early class for people who were wanting to know what education was like. And I didn't want to be a teacher, honestly. I did not. It was not in my goal path. It wasn't what I wanted to do. But he mentioned this idea that he, as a professor, was dyslexic and reading was hard for him. I was like, a professor where reading is hard? Wait, what is that? So I got really interested and I started asking him questions. What does it mean? And as he started describing everything that he experienced, I was like, oh, that's what's wrong with me in my mind. And it made so much sense why I had to read things. It took me 3 or 4 times longer than my peers and why writing was difficult. But what also revealed itself to me was why I had a special gift that others didn't have. Because most of my peers, college peers included, would read a word, read a passage, look at the words, and then make a decision about what this means. Because when I read something, words move around, they disappear. It's a really weird, bizarre phenomenon. So words don't have the same meaning in that way. So I had to look for the meaning that the words were trying to communicate, not what the meaning was of the words, which is different. So I'm looking for the truth underneath the words. So you're saying something, but what are those words trying to communicate? It's different than these words mean this. So that's how the gift started to evolve, is that I started to see things that people were talking about that the words hadn't arrived to yet. And the professors were like, that's right. How do you know that? And I was like, I don't know how I know that. That just seemed like what you're talking about. He's like, that's right. That's what happens in the next. So it was an interesting shift that was happening within me, but it wasn't because I could hang on to the words. It's because I could hang around onto meaning. So when people come to me to help them with books, I'm trying to teach them that books aren't words. And that's really difficult for people because they're saying things like, well, what do you mean a book isn't words? Isn't that all a book is words? I said, no, words are just the message or the messenger holding on to the message so that you can hear it. But that's not the message. The message is something simpler, something peaceful, something easy to carry around, like with your 2 fingers. Because think about a book that you care about and you could talk about it. You could talk about what it did for you, what it means. So it's not the words. You're not quoting chapter 6, paragraph 3, line 3. You're quoting the message, and that's different than the words. So my job became infinitely easier when I realized my gift had nothing to do with words in the way traditionally it was thought of, and everything to do with finding the message behind the words. So that's kind of where my shift happened in college and why dyslexia became a gift instead of the curse that it was growing up.
You stumbled into becoming a teacher. That wasn't your original path, but then it became your passion. Now, your teaching evolved too. You were involved in teaching and being a principal and leading teachers for 20 years. Tell us a little bit about your evolution as a teacher, because you may have started out by teaching English, but then all of a sudden, as things evolved, your students were publishing books. And I want to hear that story.
Yeah, you know what was amazing? 2006-ish, maybe 2005, when KDP, or the Amazon self-publishing platform, was opening up. It used to be called CreateSpace, and then they merged it to Amazon. But you could publish a book, and I thought, wow, well, we could publish our kids. Like, wouldn't it be cool if every one of our kids became published? Like, what would that be like for them if they no longer thought about someday? Like, we tell them, you're going to need this geometry. When? Well, someday. And you never need it, that kind of thing. Well, that's kind of what we do with all kids. We tell them they're going to need it someday, but it's not true. It's a lie. So if you're a teacher, I hope you hear this. It's a lie. They don't need all that stuff someday. If they don't need it now, they don't need it someday. So my thinking was, what if they need it now? What would it look like? I said, then I would treat them like authors and they would write books that matter. And so I made that shift around 2006 and I started to teach kids about authorship. I no longer taught writing, I taught authorship. That looks like is when you come into work or to school, you have projects you're working on and they mean something to you and you live the life of an author. You sit down, you're either editing, refining, starting a new story, abandoning a piece, coming back to a piece, but you're prolific, you're producing work. And our kids in my classroom would produce 10,000 typed pages of material, even if all of it wouldn't get published, because they were used to living like an author. And so when people started to come in to read these books of other kids, they're like, kids wrote this? I'm like, yeah. My kids won't even finish a 2-page essay. How are they writing all these volumes of books? I go, because I'm stopped making it. It's not a class. This is their role in life. They choose to be authors. And that changed everything for them. And those kids became, not theoretically someday, able to write. They were publishing ahead of people who were teaching them.
I mean, one of the things you taught too, which was interesting, I mean, these are sort of 7th, 8th, 9th graders, I think, who have the written word. But you went into classrooms with teachers where kids didn't have the written word. And there was an example of one kid that, well, tell us the story of the ant and the elephant.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I became a teacher and then a master teacher, and I would instruct new teachers in their classroom about writing or teaching. And it was a kindergarten class. And I went in there to show teachers how to teach writing. And the teacher's like, what? I said, well, we're going to write today. And I had all the markers and big jumbo pencils, those ones with the big eraser. And I said, we're going to write today. And the teacher pulled me aside and said, you know what? They don't know how to write yet. Some of them can write their name, but they're really emergent writers. None of them know how to write. I said, oh, it's okay. They'll be okay. So I told them we're going to write stories, and I gave them a little time, and there'll be a bell, and they'd write, and then they'd stop, and we'd read them. So I just said, go, and off these kids went writing. Without any, they didn't know what they were doing. Some kids were mimicking writing what they thought what cursive was. Some kids were actually writing letters because they had preschool, and other kids were drawing and pretending that they knew what writing looked like and felt like. But I came to this one kid, his name was Johnny, and this is the one you're talking about. And I said, Johnny, tell me what your story is. And he said, and it was scribbles. It didn't look like anything. There was not a single word on this page. I don't even know if he could write his name. I said, tell me the story. And he told this beautiful story. He said, I'm telling the stories about an ant. I said, oh. He's like, yeah, and the ant gets in trouble. I said, oh, is that right, Johnny? He goes, yeah. Well, tell me. And he told me about this ant who was supposed to go straight home, but didn't go home from school. And so his mother thought he was lost. So his mother went looking for him. And his mother was an elephant. Of course, logical. Why wouldn't an ant have an elephant as a parent? So he went out, and the mother was looking for him and went into a tree thinking Johnny, the little ant, was there. And then the mother got stuck in the tree. And so Johnny went on to tell this beautiful story about the moral of trusting your kid, right? Think about how deep that is for that student. Why he was saying he should be trusted by what? A parent, a bigger parent, from an ant to an elephant. He was deep. It was very deep. And he told this whole story and how the ant had to rescue his mom, and it had a beautiful conclusion. And I looked at the teacher, I said, storytelling is innate in our human design. You don't need to teach this. You just need to let them do it. And that's true for you all. Writing a book isn't something you need to be taught. It's something you need to give yourself permission to do. And when he had permission, Johnny wrote a beautiful story without the efforting of a teacher or rules or grammar or spelling. And that's the story.
Wow. I love that. And I like that you gave them free reign, and not every teacher teaches that way, but to be able to kind of have the whiteboard and let the students just roam as they wanted to. And there's the story right there in their head. They just needed to come out. I love that.
Yeah. What was really interesting, as you talked about my evolution as a teacher, I did what I was told, right? I learned to teach from other teachers, and they say, do this. Terrible ideas, like don't smile until December. And I was like, why? They're like, because they'll know who's in charge if you don't. Just real stuff that they keep passing down. And eventually I let go of all that stuff, and I realized that kids had more answers than we were letting them. And writing was one of them. I didn't need to teach them writing. I needed to give them time. And one year, towards the end of my teaching career, I told my principal, even though I had been a principal many years, I was working under a lot of principals who were their first time, so we had a confidant relationship. So they would do little nice things for me. And I said, I don't want you to give me any desks or chairs this year. She's like, what? Yeah, take them all out. Don't move them, donate them, hide them. I don't want them back. She's like, why? I go, I'm going to do an experiment to see if I can change the way I teach. And she's like, oh. And what I did was the first day of class, all the kids came in the classroom there was no desks or tables. They're like, where do we sit? I said, wherever you like. They sat near the sink. Can I lay on the floor? Absolutely. Our first project was, how do we design a classroom where people do work? They're like, but what do you mean? I go, that's what we're going to learn to find out. Where do we do work? Where's meaningful? How do we know it's the place for work? What would it feel like? What kind of work would you be doing? And so for 6 weeks, they investigated this idea. They interviewed second graders and adults. They just couldn't interview people in their own grade. They're like, why? I go, because you're going to have a bias. You need to find out generally, why do people do work? So second graders have a different opinion than they wanted to go to Starbucks and ask adults. I said, go ask them. You can ask anybody. And then they need to get in teams and model out what would an ideal learning space look like. And they would pitch their idea. They shared models. They iterated back with the original person. I taught them design thinking because I'd gone to Stanford D School about design thinking. And they were really good at it. The winning design at the end of it all, we presented at the end of 6 weeks, was that it should be a flexible space that felt more like a Starbucks library that you can lay down, sit up, have a stage. And they built it on the weekends at nights with volunteers. They built this beautiful classroom space. But at the end of it, there was no place for a teacher desk. There was no front of the room anymore. So my experiment worked because I was like, I'm going to have to learn how to teach again because they didn't even give me a desk. So I ended up sitting on the floor next to them and wherever they were. Like, it was an amazing thing that kids taught me if I just let go of the idea that they needed to wait to someday to be able to be effective to the life that they have now.
That is fantastic, because what I find interesting is they almost swapped out the stage for a teacher's desk, because it's important to probably present your work or act out your work, play with your work. You talk about play as an integral part of education. One of the things in becoming adult is in some ways lose the ability to play, and we have to reach back to this era of freedom, of thought and expression to find our passion, our little p purpose, to find our story or our gift. What was it like to live in that classroom? It sounds a lot to me like a Montessori classroom a little bit. You're following the child, you're allowing them to create, as opposed to be a part of our traditional industrial educational complex, which was created for mass production or compliance. You're breaking this mold.
Yeah, it was my effort to break the mold. It's challenging because other teachers don't appreciate it. I was in a very innovative school where we didn't have textbooks already, so it was already innovative. But when I was starting doing stuff like that, they're like, wait a second, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just curious. I have an insane curiosity. What happens if you give kids permission to do stuff that you don't think they can do? And it started to shift when kids started to become my teacher. I was like, oh, I thought I was your teacher. It's the opposite. You're here, compulsory, but I'm learning from you all. So like when the shift started to happen, it just started to crumble. For example, I never was allowed to write on their papers. That was the worst thing for me when I got back my papers with those red marks. It just made me feel defeated, like I wasn't any good. And yes, school isn't about pandering to my feelings. However, it never inspired me that I could be a writer because every paper I turned in looked like a war zone. And so I was never allowed to write on their paper, nor was their parents, nor were their peers. I took away all the things you expect. We didn't have rules for the classroom. We had things they needed to tell me I needed to do. I'm the one working there. They're guests. So what they said I should do, I would do. Those are just turning the teacher classroom on its head. And one of the things is I can't grade your paper. I'm grading not your worth of your writing. I'm grading, did you follow the process of writing? Did you have an idea, brainstorm? Did you edit? Did you rewrite? Did you get feedback? Did you incorporate that? Like the process of being an author. So one kid said, hey, look, Mr. T, they call me Mr. T because my name can be a mouthful. So you're saying there's no length requirement for our writing, like our essays or papers? We can just turn in whatever? I said, oh, no, you can't just turn in whatever. Remember, there's a process. They're like, but like if it's a sentence long, we could just turn it in and we could get an A if we follow the process. I said, if it's worth an A, of course. They're like, well, that's all I'm going to do is write sentences. I said, stop. Everyone stop. Everyone is writing. Bill wants to write a one-sentence story and doesn't want to write more. So we're going to, for 40 minutes, we're going to write one-sentence stories and then turn them in. And Bill went to go work on it, and it was extremely difficult to write a one-sentence story. But when they started to do it, it started to shift the classroom because they started to use their mind. I gave them the example of this. Baby shoes for sale, never worn. That was my example of a one sentence story. I said, "Do you get it?" They're like, "Wow, yeah, because of this and that." I'm like, "Uh-huh." So they took off and started working on it. And they started bringing it back and rereading it. And we realized how infinitely harder it was to write a one sentence story than several pages. So that kid goes, "Okay, never mind. I get it."
Yeah, and you know what I'm thinking, Azul. So you're doing this teaching, but this is still inside of an institution, a structured organization. So how did that play with the school itself, the district, and all of that? How did that play?
It didn't always play well, I got to be honest. One semester, I told my 7th grade students, I told their parents in a parent meeting that 2 things. I showed a slide. It was 2007, I think. I showed a slide of a picture of the iPhone. And they're like, it was new. It was so new that not everybody had it. Like I said, this is the thing that's going to change your kid's life and makes what I teach here meaningless. I go, because their jobs they have when they get out of college haven't yet been invented. They're like, I go, so I'm not going to teach them anything that you were taught, anything that's said to be taught, because those things won't matter by the time they get there. They rebelled, and I said, we're not doing grades. They hated that. They were really like pushing back. What do you mean? I want grades. I want to know how I'm doing. I said, if you don't know how you're doing, that's what I should be teaching you, not what grade I give you. That doesn't matter. What grade I give you doesn't matter. What you believe you're doing matters. I got a lot of pushback when I would try these things in these schools. I would have them reading college level books because they were capable of reading Maya Angelou at 7th grade. They just needed more time. They needed to slow down. So I wrestled some parents to the ground who were just like not happy, wanted to pull their kid out of my classroom because I would do things that didn't make sense. Like one day they came in and there was just paper clips on the floor because I didn't have a desk, remember? They're like, paper clips. What do we do with that? I said, everyone get one. Oh, okay, whatever. Mr. T is doing weird things. I said, you now have 45 minutes to trade that paper clip for anything else. What do you mean? I said, you have 45 minutes to trade that for something else. They're like, this is stupid. One kid got the thing and ran out the door. Another kid looked around, and the other kid ran out. 2 kids. The other kid's like, wait, what do you want us to do? Before I could finish that sentence, the kid came back, goes, I got a pen from the secretary. The other kid came back, I got a notebook. It just kept happening. Someone goes, I got this desk. You rolled this desk in? Yeah, Mr. G traded this for a desk. The last kid came in. He said, dangling keys. He goes, I got the principal keys to their car. I was like, wow. So we sat down and talked about it. Like the value of something is perceived. You all traded this same value thing for other things. Why did that happen? How did it feel? What were you doing? What did you say? Right? Did that have anything to do with language arts or history? No. Had everything to do with understanding deeply what value is in the world.
Well, what you're teaching them is stuff like negotiation. You're teaching them collaboration. And you refer to, people call it cheating, but it's really collaboration. You are turning everything on its head, putting it in the inverse, and telling us that our schooling needs to change with the times. It doesn't seem, I mean, based on my experience with my kids, it doesn't seem to have to. Why are we not embracing philosophies like yours of turning everything on its head?
Mainly, if you ask my opinion, it's because teachers don't want to accept the fact that they're always outnumbered and they're never in control. They never are. I used to be a principal of a school, like a grade level principal for a school of 4,000 kids. There was no way we could control that school. It was all facade. At any moment, they could take over. Any moment that they chose. That's always true. In your classroom, you're outnumbered every time. So stop pretending that and creating control to put kids in their place, right? Play for young people is inclusive. Play for adults is to win. Rules for young people is inclusion. Rules for adults is control. Let me give you an example. If you come in late or you're tardy, there's a rule is to penalize you for not being compliant. You don't have a pencil, you get punished. You don't. All these things are punishment and control. So I got rid of rules. We don't need rules in this classroom. What are we going to know what to do? I'm like, you don't know what to do? You don't know you shouldn't come here on time or be if you don't come prepared, am I supposed to punish you or get you to work? Like what? Let's be honest. And so when I started to shift things around, it started to change the way kids saw themselves. But teachers are afraid, and that's the biggest fear, is they're afraid to give up control, but they don't have it. Kids are going to figure it out pretty soon. They're just going to get up and walk out one day and never come back.
So Azul, you've lived this very creative life with you and your husband, but you had kids, and your kids are now grown adults. I'm interested because growing up with you guys as parents is different than, say, my parents, which was a very traditional boomer upbringing. What was it like for your kids to experience this? And can you give us a brief snippet of what their journey was that led them to where they are now?
I grew up traditionally too. My parents were children of farm workers and didn't have a lot. I was the first person to go to college in my family, to be educated. So there was a strong sense of education, but I wasn't necessarily telling my kids education is the way. I didn't have an expectation that they needed to go to school. I just had an expectation they needed to go do something when they left high school. Like what? And our son, who always hated school. I mean, hate is a strong word. He's dyslexic as well, so you can imagine school's hard. But he was the kid, as a principal, we would call a runner. A runner is the kid that bolts out of the school and just runs. He was in second grade. He was a runner. And that means he hated school so much that when it got too stressful, he would run. And one day I had to drive back from this town I was principal of to his town and bring him back to class, watching him kick and scream, not wanting to go to school. And that broke my heart because I'm like, kids should want to go to school, right? My own kid. So that's when I made the decision I wanted to shift and go to a school that was less traditional. So we were living in Austin, Texas. We moved to San Diego, and I left my career as a principal to become a teacher again because I wanted to have like innovative way to show him that he didn't have to do school. He loved making movies, drawing. He could draw in perspective even as a 4-year-old. I don't know how. I didn't teach him, right? No one taught him. He ended up going to college on a partial scholarship to art school, even though he had never taken art class. He had a really beautiful portfolio and got accepted into art school. But in the first week, I was probably 5 weeks in, but the first time he told me was about 6 weeks after he's like, I hate school. I want to die. I'm like, oh my gosh, that does not sound like a good. He's like, I want to drop out. And I said, well, of course you should drop out. Of course you should. He's like, it's okay. I go, oh, absolutely. Remember, this is just an experiment in life. And it's what I hope all parents would be willing to do. Some people are like, oh, that seems terrible advice. I'm like, he knew what he wanted. He knew he didn't want to do it. He knew that this wasn't the path for him. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. He's going to have to work hard at the new path. He's not going to be handed a job, but I'm not sure kids going to college these days get handed a job anymore. So he dropped out of art school and started taking a gap year and traveled and lived in Brazil in a small village outside of Sao Paulo teaching photography to kids. He had never traveled there by himself before. He started learning how to make designs for record labels and posters. He was always creative in that way. And he made his way making a job at a coffee shop, designing for their brand, even though he was serving coffee. So he just finds his way, even though he's not perfect. And some days, like last night, I was talking to him. He was having a hard time about something. And towards the end, when he got through what he was working on, he asked me, well, how's your writing, Dad? Because he knows I'm working on the screenplay that I've been working on. He's like, I was hemming and hawing. He's like, well, you know what the solution to that is? And I said, what? He said, go right. I was like, dang it, you're right. So it's shifted. Like his perspective is he's reflecting back the things I think I've taught him. And the same thing with their daughter. She worked for a university. She was a young person. It was the assistant to the dean of the Makeover business school at UT. She had already got this very quickly. She goes, but everyone there, you look in their eyes who've been there 10 years, look miserable. He goes, I don't want to be here in 10 years looking like that. I don't care if I have health care and a 401k. So she started to quit and she started a vegan bakery online, which was a total risk. And some months was great. And some she got to get another job to supplement. But I know that they'll just experiment until they find what's right for them. What they would say about this, I don't know. Why is Dad driving Lyft at night? I don't know. It's because I'm trying to figure it out. But yeah, they have a different perspective. But I do hope they believe that they can do anything they want.
And Azul, you know what I'm getting out of this story, and kudos to your kids, is that even though you was a bit of a late starter when it comes to the entrepreneurial side, the authorship lead and all of that, your kids had a strong takeaway of entrepreneurship and sort of the free-flowing approach that you took. So our audience could take away as well that whatever they do, even if it's later on in life, that the kids, the grandkids, anybody around your community see what you're doing and they will feed off of you.
Yeah.
Well, you follow your parenting style follows your teaching style. They're one and the same. I mean, you give your kids permission to live their life and create, and don't try and necessarily box them into the traditional educational style or the traditional American dream. It's their dream. It's their individual life. And the strength you have is to be willing to support that as opposed to question it. And I think that is, we've learned not only about authorship and financial independence, these lessons all apply to things even like parenting, which is why I wanted to get this story out there. They're watching what we do and they want to forge their own path. And our jobs as parents is to support them and help them achieve their dreams and not box them in. So thank you for those stories.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's the same thing when my kids, I realized I couldn't be hypocrites to my own children like I was doing to my teaching students, is that I can't tell them anything's possible if I'm not willing to try. And I believe in FI, but I also don't think that I had to have done it any other way. The year I made 3 times the amount of money of my principal salary, when I was like, what happened? I don't know what's happening. Is I realized, wow, you could make money is just an energetic shift of things. I'm not being paid to show up like I used to, but money comes and goes like a flow of life. And I just learned to appreciate that. And I think they have too. They know that sometimes they'll have a little and sometimes they'll have a lot, but it doesn't mean that it changes the worth of who they are on the inside. And that's what I want. Happiness was more important to me than even what they thought they should be doing with their life.
Well, Azul or Mr. T, you would have been my favorite teacher. Okay, I love all of this. But obviously at some point, you made the shift from being a teacher as your career to being an entrepreneur, a storyteller, and you moved into that direction. Talk to us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, I had been thinking about it for a while, mainly because I was no longer fitting into the square that the round peg was supposed to, right? I didn't fit. I was struggling. I was starting to struggle with this idea of education and indoctrination. And I started to get inspired because I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't have any evidence I was good at it. That was the problem, right? In past schooling. One of my students, when we were having a book fair, came up to me. They were putting out all their books that were published and having other classes come read them and be inspired. And for my book. And I didn't have one. And I was so embarrassed. And he just said, "Where's your book, Mr. T?" I said, I thought about lying and making it, "Oh, it's about you. It's not about me." But the truth was I just didn't have one. And said, I don't have a book. They're like, "Well, why not?" I said, "Because I don't think I'll have anything to say that's worth saying." And he really scolded me in a beautiful way. He said, "Well, you always tell us it doesn't matter, just write. So you should write." And then he walked off and I was like, "You little turkey." Called my bluff, which was true. I was being a hypocrite, right? Saying it was right for them, but not for me. And I couldn't do that. Either I had to write the book or I had to actually get out, because it would be a lie. There would be no good reason why I didn't write a book after that. So I did. I wrote that book, The Art of Apprenticeship, the 30 days after that conversation. And that's when it shifted for me, because I did have something to say. I did have meaningful things to share. And I just didn't know it. And I think that's why writing a book is so important to me. It's not because you need to make a living as a writer, but everyone has something to say, and your opinion matters. Your voice and your point of view matters. And so that's the shift that happened. And I started to looking for ways for me to change my life. And people started asking me, "Well, how did you write this book in such a short? What did you do?" I said, "Oh, short. It took me 24 years and 30 days, 24 years to haw. And finally the 30 days to actually do it was more of an act of contrition than it was an effort."
Well, you talked about being taught by your students, and you learned that you can't be a hypocrite. You can't teach what you aren't willing to learn. And you were schooled by your student. And you learned, or one of the questions you asked over and over again of your students was, "What makes a great teacher?" And you got a plethora of answers. You did almost a research project on this. What were some of the answers and what did they mean?
At first, I didn't know what they meant. In fact, I thought it was actually a very stupid exercise that I learned from my master teacher when I was a first-year teacher. They hand you worksheets at the beginning, the first week of class, and you fill it in. It kind of felt like that. A good teacher's nice, a good teacher's friendly, a good teacher, blah, blah, blah. Seemed very unimportant to me. But I kept doing it because my teacher said, "It's a good first of the year thing to get to know your kids." I was like, okay. But when she was doing it, I realized they were cheating off each other. What did you put for number 8? I need another one. And I started thinking, well, why don't they know what makes a good teacher great? So I just kept doing this activity year after year after year, hundreds and hundreds, and then thousands, and then tens of thousands of responses, 26,000 responses. And it took me a long time. But I started asking myself, well, what is it they're saying? And the first thing I had to change is she had put, my master teacher, a good teacher is, and she had the kids finish the sentence. But I realized that was controlling because she was in control of the verb. That's why they didn't like it. Is that you had. I said, what if I made the verb the choice? So I said, a great teacher, and I left it blank. Kids then had a lot of things to say. A good teacher doesn't suck. A good teacher wants more for their kids. A good teacher has a sense of humor. A good teacher eats apples, and things like this. I'm like, wait a second. Now this is not what I expected. So I had to start to listen to what they said because I didn't totally understand what they were saying at first, to be honest. So I started doing what they said, and that's when things started to shift for me. I started realizing, oh, this is a teaching moment. This is something I have to accept and learn. Except for the teachers or my students, it's not me. And then things started to really shift for me. Maybe a little late because I was already 27 years in, but I started to realize that kids had a lot more to say than we were giving them permission to.
Well, you looked for the depth of what they said. They were brief sentences, but it contained a whole story for you. Why does a teacher eat apples? And what did that really mean?
Well, I didn't know because I thought it was a cliche, right? You go to the teacher store, there's apple this, apple that. I thought they're just being stupid. They're being silly. Until one day I said, I got it again. It wasn't just once. It said it often. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why multiple years, different classes, different locations are they saying this? So I just got a big bag of apples one day and I just started eating apples all the time before class, at school, at lunch, just trying to figure out why would a great teacher eat apples? Like, what does that mean? And I still had no idea. So I didn't try to figure it out first. I just did what they said. And kids would stop me and go, you're eating apples. I was like, yes. Another kid, you're eating apples. They started bringing me apples. And I was like, what is going on? What does this mean? Why does a great teacher eat apples? And I think the long and short of it was that they wanted me to know that what they're giving me was just as valuable as what I was giving them. Because I would eat something they touched with their hands that wasn't wrapped in cellophane, that wasn't in a candy wrap. They touched this and they gave it to me and I ate it. And there was some reciprocation that was happening in that moment. And I think they started to trust me more because I was trusting them more. So I think that's the lesson I started to learn from these things. It was not the words. This is the other thing I was telling you, right? The words, that doesn't mean much. It was underneath the words that meant a lot that I had missed the whole time.
Yeah, I definitely picked up some lessons back when you were talking earlier about when you found out that you were dyslexic, because I haven't been diagnosed or anything, but it is difficult for me to read because I do try to read for comprehension and it takes me forever. And I always tell Bill, I'm like, wow, that's a big book. I can't read that book, but I want to know the story. I want to know the essence of the book, and I'm better off like listening, whether it's the audiobook version or on a podcast or something like that. So you helped me kind of diagnose myself just a little bit to say that it's more valuable for me to know the story underneath than to read the actual words. And you taught that to your kids, and now you are a coach, you're head of Authors Who Lead, and now you've got a whole new set of students, right?
Yeah, I do.
What caused you to exit the building? Because there are other creative teachers out there, and I want to give a shout out to Dan Thone. I had never heard of this. And you can do this with English, but you can do it with other subjects. I mean, how do you do this with math?
So I had a professor from MIT reach out to me after I gave my TED Talk. I want to come back to this dyslexic thing too, but came back here to ask me, could he use his assistant asked me, could he use one of my slides in his TED Talk he was giving? And part of me was like, that seems kind of strange. I mean, I don't know. What is he talking about? And at the end of it, I just said, as long as you give credit to the person who made it, myself and the illustrator, because they did that for their living. I don't want to just let them pass it around. So one of the things he quoted, I was so curious, what is he going to do with this? I was referring to middle school, like when I was talking about these things. He had told me, and I didn't know until I watched his TED Talk, that he had tried the experiment with his students. He tried it first because he was going to go be a 6th grade teacher from professorship. And he said it was really hard. And then he went to be a professor at Teach University. I don't know if it was chemistry, but he did with one of the things I said, which was a great teacher sings. One of the things my students told me. And he said he sang to his class and it erupted into this incredible applause, just like it happened to me in my classroom. But these were college-age students. What I noticed is that I had more influence and power and potency outside of the classroom because now I was influencing people in a bigger way, right? I don't know how many students I've helped over the course of my 25 years in the classroom, but having a TED Talk that impacted 4 million is much more powerful. So I made that shift because I realized, oh, I need to move beyond this and push myself out there because I'm limiting who I think I am by staying in the classroom because I have a belief that if I leave, I'm hurting kids, I'm not committed, I'm not all these sort of stories. But what I realize is I've made more impact by giving that one 18-minute talk than I did all those years I was in the classroom.
Oh, wow. You hit home there. I definitely love the idea of one-to-many. I was doing stuff that was not touching very many people at all. But yeah, once you hit the stage and the talk is recorded, you're writing books, you're talking millions and you're impacting so many more people. And Bill, that's what we're kind of doing with the podcast. We have had moments where we are doing one-on-one or small groups. It's like we have a bigger voice. There's ways that we should be sharing this that will touch more people. And so I love hearing that from you, Azul.
And dyslexia, because it's some part of our development, we don't know we have it. We don't know what's going wrong. At 3rd grade, I became exceptionally good at memorizing those primers, Jack,
Right.
Jane,
Yeah.
Dick, or whatever. But eventually, chapter books I couldn't memorize. So at 3rd grade, they realized I couldn't read. Like I was compensating all along. And I'm really good at speaking because it's a better form. I would convince my teachers to let me do a speech or something more than a paper if I could. And that's sort of how it developed. But if you use your gift in a way that complements you, you start to actually exercise it. So for me, like if you asked me, I was a little bit nervous when you asked me to read out loud. I'm like, I know I wrote it, but I still struggle with reading out loud. When I was 48, I learned to speed read, which I never even knew I could do. Because we were taught in school to sound out words, right? Sound this out. And I didn't want to tell any teacher that these little things don't make sounds. Do they make sounds to you? It's just, yeah, they make sounds. Like, these just are little sticks and word, like letter. They don't make sounds to me. They kept telling me it makes sound it out. I'm like, there's no sound it's making. Well, like these letters make a sound. I go, not to me, it doesn't. So all this reading slowly happened because I was pronouncing every word, every syllable. Our humanity, like our night. I was pronouncing every single syllable and every word because that's what they tell you. They don't tell you to stop doing that. But really, vocalization is what slows most of us down. We read every word. I don't read every word. I read from top right corner to bottom left corner, and I consume paragraphs at a time because I can. My brain can. But most people think that especially dyslexic, we think we're supposed to read the way we're taught. You have to let go of what they taught you to be able to read more quickly and efficiently because reading every word did not help me at all.
Yeah, all this is making sense to me. I took the CFP exam a couple of years ago, and they have these case studies that's like several paragraphs. And I was deathly afraid of taking this timed exam because I knew I would get stuck on reading the case studies for comprehension. So I had to find ways around that. And through the whole process of getting my CFP, I was an auditory learner, and I had to find ways to have someone talking about a topic on YouTube or something like that. But boy, did I learn stuff about myself. And you are like setting off all kinds of bells and whistles for my learning style.
Yeah, because I would tell kids, the first thing I would do is put on the chalkboard a little box and a check mark. And I said, this is my spell check. And they would laugh. And they're like, I said, because I will spell things on this board that will be correctly spelt today and tomorrow or next period will be spelt wrong. My brain doesn't know the difference between certain words. I can't tell you if they're spelt right. I can tell you if they're spelt wrong, but I can't always tell if they're spelt right. And so my spell check is you can feel free to come correct it if it's wrong. You can feel free to challenge me when it's wrong. That's my spell check. You become my human spell check, but I don't take offense to it. But as long as you know I'm extremely intelligent, I have a master's degree from UCLA, I'm not unintelligent. I just have this way my brain works is different than yours. And they accepted that. And one kid came back when he was a college student, said, hey, I wrote my paper about you telling me about you being dyslexic because I realized my disability didn't define me. And I decided I was going to college and I got in because I wrote about that. I was like, that's amazing. That's great.
I mean, my educational style was reading books and memorization. I pursued the traditional model. I'm of that generation. I'm 60 years old. And I struggled with perfection. I mean, in order to write a paper, I had to write it in my head first. I couldn't just go through stream of consciousness and flow and recursively write and rewrite until the story really became clear and it wasn't fuzzy anymore. I run from fear of failure. Paulo Coelho talks about there is only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve, the fear of failure. And one of the things you do with your authors coaching is to help people with that. Tell me about the fear of failure and how you do overcome it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Most of what I do is I don't teach people how to write, right? Because I didn't even teach students. They already know. I just teach them to get better at what they're doing. So one of the things I do to help people is realize that most of what you fear has nothing to do with writing. Your fear is what happens when you're done with writing. So we need to address that before you write. My fear is, what if no one likes this? What if this is bad? What if they laugh at me? What if this isn't my best? What if I'm wrong? What if all these things? That's what I spend a great deal of my time helping people with. And I don't want them to feel belittled by it. I want them to feel aware. I'm like, well, I just need to know how the marketing works. I go, oh, are you afraid that if you write your book and it doesn't get marketed well, it won't do well? Yeah. I said, okay, at least we're honest. But we're not marketing our book right now. We're writing. Authorship's about owning the fact that you're going to be doing it terrified. Can you accept that? You want to know, how do I get rid of all these feelings? Those feelings are what motivate you. Fear and feelings are the fuel you need to write. Because if you don't fear anything, you won't write anything worth saying. You'll write what you think people want to hear. That's different. So you have to let go of the idea that you need to remediate fear to do the work. Fear is what you should lean into, not run from or get rid of. Perfectionism is a way for us to avoid it. Like if I just do it right, though, I won't get those feelings. I won't get ridiculed. I won't get made fun of. I won't look stupid. I'm like, oh, then you're not going to be a writer. Guess what? That's all it is. Because you're taking the risk of putting yourself out there. That's what I spend my time coaching people on, the soul of being a human, about being okay with who they are and not being afraid, like middle school, that if I wear this outfit, I'll be made fun of. It's just the adult version of what that happens. And kids taught me this, right? I didn't learn anything I didn't learn from a kid.
And Azul, would that be the same with fiction and nonfiction?
Yes. I find fiction extremely rewarding, but infinitely harder. Because there's some good part about nonfiction is you're writing about what you know. I know a lot about phi, so I can write about it. I never wrote a book about what makes a good teacher great because I don't think I know a lot about that. I think I'm learning about that, but I don't know a lot about that. But you can write what you know, but infinitely more difficult to write who you are, right? Because of AI, I just interviewed a gentleman, his name's Jeff, who was running for governor of Utah during the pandemic and wrote a book recently called The Last Book Written by a Human. Fascinating book. But what was interesting about it was that he was saying that, look, if AI can start to do these things, writing what you know, right? Think about it. Writing what you know, then what you know is not a commodity anymore. So the only thing left to write about is who you are, which is uniquely imprinted on who you are as a person. There's no one like you. You were just like your fingerprint, right? So write that. But that with writing that comes this extreme amount of fear of not being enough. You're right. You're not enough for anyone else. You're the only person here on this planet with those things and thoughts in your mind. So you're right. You're never going to measure up to other people. And that's terrifying because they want to. I want to be sure it goes well. I'm like, ooh, I can't tell you. That's what life is. That's what life is about, not knowing. That's where creativity comes from, the unknown, not from knowing.
Right. I definitely felt that when I was writing. I didn't quite know what I was doing, but I felt that when I was writing both books. One day, Bill, perhaps we will have a book around catching up to phi and our unique perspectives and things like that. And I think there's a little fear with that. Like you said, you like to try to go for perfection and all of that. And Azul is telling us it's not perfection. I love some of the stories that you tell. And I guess I see certain aspects of the book being unique enough to where It needs to be out in the atmosphere, and perfection isn't required, right?
No, because catching up to FI is all about being imperfect, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
If you're catching up, but the majority of us, when I walked into that room, I was so intimidated. I was like, oh, but I was like, oh, the majority of us are catching up. Most people aren't in there going, yeah, I did it. I've been doing it since I'm 28. I'm really ready. We love people who have. We would cheer them on, but that's not the majority of us, right?
Right. We knew that. We're catching up. We knew that for a long time. But Bill, you were the one that started catching up to FI, and we started talking about it. And we saw that we filled a gap, and our audience and other late starters have spoken.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
I mean, one of the
amazing.
problems about catching up to FI is that the people that get it right are perfectionists about their FI, get the numbers right. And we talk about our generation being the silent generation, the lost generation. It's sort of the real down and dirty generation where life is messy and I didn't get my finances right at the beginning. And then I do have a wake up moment. And that's when you become creative and take back your life and take back the control of your money so that you can focus on other things.
Yeah. That's what I've learned from coaching is it's often the things that you seem like not as important, not as essential, maybe a little more tender that you deal with that are the most useful because it's what the rest of us are actually experiencing. So the idea that catching up to FI isn't a problem, it actually is the way, it's liberating. It doesn't make me feel stupid. It doesn't make me feel like, well, I should have known. I mean, I did know, but I didn't do it. I cashed out my retirement to buy that lake house and it burnt down. Like whatever we did, this is where we're at. I think it's a beautiful reason to write a book, even if it's on your heart, because the majority of us are the ones who aren't going to be doing FI because we missed the boat. So I just want to encourage you both. Like I went to your talk. I just felt so inspired. And I got to be honest, I was like looking around like someone's watching me. I didn't go to a lot of those talks, but I went to yours because I really thought there's something here that we're missing at this conference that I could sense you both carried with you, which is this is possible, people. Even if we started late. And I'm like, oh, is it possible for me? It was just the seed I needed. So it's not a second chapter of FI. It is FI. It is completely what FI is about, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we've had a breakout at Econome, I think for all the last 3 years. And I hope our audience, I hope your ears perked up because one of the biggest benefits of a late starter is that you have lived life. You've got the stories. How are you memorializing that? How are you putting that out there in the atmosphere for as your legacy, people coming behind you? Or also, I learned this is a way to organize your own thoughts, like the kids that were in your class. Take this stuff and put it in a way that's going to tell a powerful story. You're a storyteller too. So everyone in our audience, I'm sure they have a book in them or some other type of way to get their story out. And it could be very therapeutic. I know writing is very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
Well, vulnerability imbues trust. And there was an unspoken audience of people out there, the real citizen that didn't get their money right, that had no voice. You know, everybody in the FI community got it right. And like, who's talking to us? How do I process my shame, remorse, regret, and anger? But maybe I did get life right. Maybe I inverted it and embraced experiences first, but I realized that I've got to be responsible as well. And we hope we get people to wake up in 35, 40 before they're 55, 60, so that at least they can experience that stage 4 of retirement where there's freedom. And what we found is this has resonated with a very large community. They're not anonymous. They come out of the closet too and say, I got it wrong. This is how I got it wrong. I want to help you not make the mistakes that I made. And we're learning from each other, just like you learn from your students.
Yeah, I think it's great. And you know what? It's really amazing for those who are catching up to FI late. You can be more creative than traditional people because you don't have the luxury of time, but you have the luxury of creativity. There's a beautiful woman who she probably had no problem with her FI, but she was worried that she couldn't retire because she was a corporate attorney. And being a corporate attorney, you have a pretty substantial income and you built your lifestyle around that. But she had to keep working to ensure that into her later life that she could have that lifestyle. But she was a writer. She was writing under a pen name because she was so afraid her peers would find it. eventually her writing started to catch on, and she started to have to be a persona for her pen name. And she started to sell really good books, and she was starting to make equal money to her gig as a lawyer, which was blowing her mind. She's like, Azul, I can't believe this, but I'm afraid that I can't. So I didn't need to coach her on writing. What I needed to coach her on is letting go of the idea that she should wait 3 years so that she could retire and not be worried. So she got with her financial person. They went over the numbers several times, and she came back to me because, he says this, but I don't know. I'm like, oh, you have an issue around belief that we have to work on. And so we wrestled it away with some activities. And eventually she called me and said, I just retired. It was 3 years ahead of schedule. And she goes, you know what? I just got a Hallmark movie who wanted to buy my book. And so things shifted. She got creative because she stuck with her creativity, and things started to move. She didn't get lockstep. So her creativity gave her an opportunity that catching up to Fi can allow, because you're like, I'm just going to be creative. I'm going to start doing stuff on eBay, from stuff on garage sales. And you start getting creative and saying, well, I'll just 20 more years of this, instead of, you're like, I might do it in 5 or 10 because I'm being creative with my life. And that's what I witnessed with her. Her creativity met the gap. It was interesting that she just let go of a belief she had stuck in her head.
Wow. And it is so hard to step out of your comfort zone, but that's a great story. I love it.
Yeah, and you don't have to necessarily financially succeed with your creativity. No. I mean, I'm not retiring on this podcast, that's for sure. Jackie thinks one day we might, but we earn enough money to fuel our creativity and help produce the podcast. Yeah. And the joy in doing it, the joy in reaching people and making a difference in their lives, where we hear back from our audience, and we do want to hear back from you. You know what? You made a difference. Thank you so much for teaching me this one thing, or thank you so much for helping me unlock my financial creativity. As I've said many times before, and I'll say it again, I have gotten more joy and response and gratitude from the people that we've talked to and interacted with on this podcast and in the conferences in the last 2 years than I've gotten really from being a physician for 26 to 30 years.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
An ER physician at that.
Saving lives. That's the thing that happened to me. It was the reward I could feel happening between us both, the people that I was serving and the people who were getting back from me. It took a long time for that to happen in the classroom because I didn't let go early enough of the control. But that feeling of giving has reciprocated in me. I've been doing my podcast 8 years in October, and I've never ran ads. I didn't monetize it in any particular way because it was my gift to people, and it was the way I felt like I wanted to do it. Like, people thought, you need to monetize this, and it's like, if they come work with me, great, but I'm here to teach and explore and be curious with them, and that gift has produced more wealth than any efforting has ever.
Well, you talk about letting go of control, and what was interesting in my field, and maybe in a lot of fields, we approach life as a lone wolf, or at least in my field, I have to be captain of the ship. I have to be right. The buck stops with me. I became a better doctor when I relinquished control and monitored the team. And I've had nurses come to me and save patients' lives because they noticed something that I wasn't noticing or missing. And I had the wherewithal to go explore that and get to the answer. But they tell me something's wrong here. Just like your student said, you misspelled that word. Let me help you. And as soon as you let your team help you, you're acknowledging their value. And it's not just about, I'll take care of everything, and processing your anxiety with perfection. When you do, or when you are able to let go of control, in my case, you're practicing the art of medicine. You're practicing the art of collaboration. You don't have to have all the answers. And it's okay to commend other people for say, you know what, I would have missed that. You saved this patient's life, and thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what a testament to you as the doctor. I mean, I've helped a lot of doctors over the years, and they're not all like you with that spirit. But I think if you're listening out there and you're thinking, maybe I could write a book, there's no maybe. That maybe should be thrown out. I'm telling you, if I can do it, anyone can do it. If my kids can do it, anyone can do it. It's just a matter of, are you willing? And to put aside the idea that fear will be the thing that's always present, right? To mitigate fear is like saying that you're taking away the chance that life is giving you. Fear is the thing that makes you know you're alive. You're on the edge of something great. So I just want to encourage people, because we were designed to share something from within us. I've seen so many people's lives change. And I didn't share this from the economy stage, but there's this one gentleman that came to me. I would say he's a B-list celebrity, meaning you probably would have recognized him 10 years ago, walking people, talking people on the line at like American Idol, or he would have been somebody on a stage like Guy Fieri, or like he was a side, like a B celebrity that people would recognize but not know. And he wanted to write a book, and his book was about this incredible, terrible loss of a relationship where he showed up for coffee with his wife, and she ordered a latte and said, "I'm leaving you. I'm having someone else's baby. Goodbye," all in one breath. And he was like devastated, as you can imagine. And he left that table and got on a one-way trip around the world because he was his mom's standby who worked for the airlines. And he just kept traveling from one city to the next, trying to figure out what he'd do with his life. Well, when I found him, he thought he wanted to write about this standby life. But what I helped him see is he was stuck in a pattern of his life. And what we discovered was that through the writing of this book, that I kept asking, why is he not mad at this woman? That I would be incredibly unhappy and mad about this situation. And we discovered all along that he wasn't ever really in love with her. He was just mad at the idea that he had failed. And so once he figured that out, he was able to move on and got another relationship. That was the year he produced an Emmy-winning show. He won his first Emmy. He married a girl in his building who was he just happened to be a weather girl on the local news, and they moved back to Hollywood, and his life kicked off again. But writing did that for him. Writing shifted his life for him because he was unaware of what was inside of him unconsciously. And as he wrote it, it became more conscious. So I don't want people to think you have to be perfect. In that book, he told me at the end, he goes, I don't want to publish that. I don't need people to know all that. I thought I did because I wanted revenge, but I found myself again. That's all I was looking for. Like, great.
And so he was grateful for the trauma. Interesting in the light of AI, because I've read a book written by AI, Voice or a Perspective. And you talk about this. So we'll never lose the written word. AI will never take over individual authorship. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I think, in fact, it's only going to make it more valuable. Right? The hardest part that I found teaching anyone, young people included, was how to have a perspective. Right? English majors call it voice and tone. Remember, I don't have an English major, so I don't know. But voice and tone is your perspective. Like, who are you on this page? Why am I listening to you? And if you can't share who you really are, then me reading what you have to say won't matter. It's just words on a page. There's this one girl, boy, she wrote some hard stuff. But man, talk about a breaking open your heart as a 12-year-old writer. She moved me in such a way I could still remember her words today. She had gone through so much loss and suffering that she had the perspective that she could stand firm and tell you the truth. Whether you were 45, 50, lived a whole lifetime, you may not have lived the life she had. And because she was not fulfilling a requirement of a paper, she was writing what was true. It changed me. It shifted the people that read it. Even kids, other kids were like, whoa, you've been through this? Like, yeah. I'm like, wow. That's what perspective is. It's about who you really are when you don't worry that what you say will cause a problem. Right? Because that's why we don't write things.
Yeah. So you make such a convincing argument for the fact that everyone has a book inside of them. They have these stories to tell. They have a unique perspective. Now, back early on, you were talking about some of the logistical part of it. So if their ears are perking up, they're like, I do have a book in me. But then they get to the next step to say, well, how do I actually put this together? But you talked about Amazon and CreateSpace and how it's so easy to actually get the book to publish. Can you just give us a quick little, if someone's ready to do it, what would be some easy steps just to get it out there in the atmosphere?
Yeah, let's go over it. So Amazon has something called Kindle Direct Publishing, which allows you to publish books both digitally, like on ebook, or a print-on-demand book. And if you're not aware of what a print-on-demand book, it is a book that's printed in real time. So if you order a book on Amazon, they print it and then ship it out. They don't have a warehouse full of books, which is brilliant on their part because the most expensive part of Amazon is not fulfillment, it's storage. So if they can print a book one at a time, you can get your book printed. And it doesn't cost you a dime, meaning Amazon will let you put your book, your files up on Amazon and create an account and hit publish all in the course of one day with no cost to you. And someone could buy that book. I have a friend, I helped her write a book because it's her first written book, but she published 600 books. but they're all books with no content. So like coloring books, journals, and she makes $100,000 a year on those things. That's a FI opportunity, right? There's no, but she just puts them on there, hits publish, and then if they do well, she puts ads to them. If not, she moves on. So it's not difficult. The difficult part is the belief. But when I put it out there, all those things. So I would love to give it to your listeners as a gift. It's a secret podcast I give to my clients called Born to Write, Scared to Start. And it's 11 episodes about me dealing with these issues before you get to hit publish, because I know it's the one that will keep them from publishing if they don't get through these secret fears. But publishing on Amazon is such an easy task I'd gladly give that course away to anybody, because that's not the hard part. It's all the moments up until you hit publish that's difficult.
Okay, I just didn't want that piece to hold anyone back, but you just talked about it in less than a minute about how easy it is. And even 10 years ago, my first book, it was called Money Letters to My Daughter. I did exactly that, and I figured out how to do it. So yeah, we definitely take you up on the offer to give us that freebie for our audience, because we know that there is so much that our audience, so many stories that our audience holds that should be out in the atmosphere for everyone to read.
And we may give them an opportunity to share their stories with us and put it in our book.
Yeah.
And as a collaboration, it's just really cool the kind of impact and legacy you can have with doing this, because you say in your book, because FI and fear of money have a lot to do with writing and fear of writing a book. They're like mirror images. And you talk in your book even about learning to write a book. Wealth isn't measured by the zeros in your spreadsheet or bank account. It's measured by the impact that you leave behind. That's your quote. That isn't Gandhi. That isn't Maya Angelou. That's Azul. So we don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard. We do want to leave it all on the table. When I ran a marathon, I just didn't lope through it. I was like, I actually trained. I followed a process just like you do with a book. And when I ran the race, I said, this may be the only race I ever run. Why not leave it all on the course? And the result was incredible. And the same is true for the journey to writing a book, the journey to taking over your own money. This is the hero's journey, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people think that somehow people like you, like you're special. Yes, you are special. Like everyone's special. But the way you think of yourself, you're like, yeah, I'm kind of fumbling around here too. Yeah, that's what most people who are doing amazing things, they don't see it as special as much as they're just fumbling around as well. But trusting that they were put on this earth for a reason. And it isn't to just be FI. You're put on this earth to do something that only you can do. And most people don't investigate, well, what is that thing? Because we're good at lots of things, right? Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap, talks about you can be excellent at something, right? And that's the biggest challenge is you get stuck in your zone of excellence. You're excellent. You're an excellent principal, Azul, excellent teacher. You're a great professor. I was a professor for 8 years. You're really good at this. But being excellent isn't the same as being in your zone of genius, which is effortless. It's just who you are. And most of us don't investigate, well, what is that though? We leave that untold. And I think we should be spending our investment of time in figuring that out. That's why I talk about it in the very first chapter of that book is like, what's your gift? And if you don't know, then spend all my time doing that.
And it's all about finding, it's like the runner's high. It's about finding that moment like I'm in right now in talking with you, having this podcast. I'm in a moment of flow. And it is about finding those moments where it is effortless. You're kind of, I just watched the movie F1 with Brad Pitt. And you would think, why does that come up? Well, the purpose of the movie is to, by the end, he finds his flow again, and he's flying through a race course, and he's in that place where he feels peace. It's kind of like the art of scuba diving, where you're weightless and you're just enjoying your surroundings, and you're in a different phase of sensory deprivation. There's many, many different ways to find flow, and we want to encourage our audience to find their gift, find their flow. Use this podcast to invigorate yourself, to step outside of yourself like Azul. And I want to know, Azul, what is the next step? What is the next level of your genius? Are there future plans? Are there bigger ideas?
You know what? The zone of genius is any place you find presence. So where you find that you get lost and it doesn't feel like efforting, it feels like being. For me, it's storytelling. Obviously, on the page or on the stage, I didn't learn it. No one taught me. I mean, yes, I've taken workshops to get better at stage presence and things, but it's just something I have, and I find myself incredibly in presence when I'm telling stories. So for me, I know that anywhere I find myself in complete blissfulness of being, that's your gift. And if you haven't experienced when time disappears, that's what you're looking for. And if you can only do it for 5 minutes, then 5 minutes is enough. And maybe someday it'll be 6 and 7 and 8. I didn't know I could make a living, and I've been doing this 10 years without a boss. And I had no idea what I was doing, and I still don't. And that's not needing to know what I'm doing isn't as important as just being here and saying yes to the things that light me up. So I think that's what it is, like that. Look for more stories from me, whatever that is. That's why I started wading into fiction, wading into other mediums that use stories, because it's what's effortless for me.
Yeah. So Azul, if someone needs to get in contact with you or find your work, where is the best place for that?
I think if you go to Azul Terronez anywhere on social, I have such a unique name that you could find me. But authorsuli.com if you want to learn about what I do for coaching authors. And I have a podcast of the same name where I've been interviewing authors. I like to know behind the scenes, these big authors. Is it really as hard? But authorsuli.com if you want to learn.
Okay, and we will drop that in the show notes along with any other additional material you'd like to share with our audience. But thank you so much for joining us today. Bill, what else you got before we, Azul, get out of here?
No, I'm grateful for his time. I'm very selfish in this podcast because I get to meet fantastic people. And we're glad to take the fantastic people that we meet and share them with a different world than they may live in. Who would think that being an author and coaching authors has anything to do with personal finance, but they're intimately related? There's a lot more connection in this world than we allow ourselves to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Azul, and we will see you next time on Catching Up to 5.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofy.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to 5. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to 5. Cheers.